good.
Beautiful.
Thank you very much. Okay. So, um, I wanted to do this slide or this presentation for a couple of reasons. And one of them being is that we are focusing on some new skills in puppy development and working towards readying your puppy to come back for training. And so in 2020, we decided to take away our in for training standards. I'm sorry, in for training standard assessments or the evaluations that we were traditionally doing, or your IFT assessment. And we are still encouraging that you definitely study and practice all of the components of the IFT, but no longer are you going to be assessed for them in that formal way. In its place, we picked out some key components of training that we thought were most important that your puppy counselor focused on each month, and that while we're not going to have a numerical or more of a stringent evaluation process, we do want them to evaluate, are you on your mark? Are you meeting your goals? Are you where you are supposed to be for a puppy raiser of your skill and background and with a puppy of a certain age? So obviously the skill that's appropriate for an 8 to 10 week old puppy is going to be different for a 6 to 7 month old puppy and very different for a 12 to 14 month old puppy. And so one of the things that we qualified, which is very important, is the handler's exam. And we're going to get into all the details in just a little bit. And so, one of the things that we're going to be looking at during the month of March, because each month has a designated task, is the handler's exam. And so I thought that I would present this to you, and I can't take 100% credit for it. One of the things, and you guys know I've commented to this effect before, we really appreciate when our puppy raisers can give feedback on some of the topics that you want to see presented. Um, we do all the write-ups and the presentation, each one of the coordinators. Sometimes it can get hard thinking of new creative material to present and what's going to be most valuable and important to you. And so in order to present what is valuable to you, we love getting feedback and asking, hey, would you mind doing something on this? So actually, one of my puppy raisers in the Rochester group, I'll give a shout out to them. They brought this to my attention and said, "Hey, can you give me more information about the handler's exam?" Which made this perfect timing in order to include this in a presentation. So here we are. Let's get physical. Hopefully, you guys are old enough to know that reference as much as I do. Um, if not, it's something to find on YouTube. And we're going to talk about mastering the handler's exam and getting really successful. So, first, I want to start out by talking about the purpose of the handler's exam. What are we trying to achieve? So, for a future leader dog, routine grooming is really important skill to have. It is so important because they're going to be part of the public eye. They are part of the public eye as future leader dogs. So they're going out. Typically, they're visiting stores. They may be visiting heavily populated areas. They are representing our organization. And so we want them to be well kept and well groomed. If we saw a very scraggly, dirty, unbrushed, unkept puppy with a leader dog jacket on, it would really make you curious about what are the recommendations of that organization. What are they encouraging their puppy raisers to do and not to do? So, as the face of Leader Dog, and our puppy raiser is our face of Leader Dog, and our puppies are the face of Leader Dog, we want to make sure that they are well kept and they need to be comfortable with being brushed and groomed. All too often, I hear that puppies are not being comfortable with being brushed. or they're only comfortable with a certain type of brush. Typically that rubber brush with the little nubs, we call them a Zoom Groom. They really like that. But when it comes to some of the harder material, like the slicker brushes or the combs or the rakes, they may not feel as comfortable with having being brushed by one of those tools, despite the fact that those really get out the undercoat and some of the dead fur that really needs to come out. So part of our handler's exam is causing comfort for grooming. We also want our puppies to develop general comfort with being examined by familiar and unfamiliar people. So at various points, they're going to need medical exam, starting out when they're really little baby puppies, and God willing, for the rest of their 8, 10, or 12 years of life, they're going to need medical exams. Whether they are part of Leader Dog, they go on to an alternative career, or they're adopted by you or your family, they're always going to need some sort of medical care, annual vaccines, annual exam, treatment for medical concerns. And so we want them to be comfortable with being examined. And we want this to be an easy process for any veterinary professionals that examine them, or a groomer that may examine them as well. Part of handler's exam is that we want to teach compliance and the ability to stay still and relax while being cared for. So maybe we can get things done, but what if we can only get things done because we anesthetize or sedate our dogs? We don't want to do that every single time. We want them to be compliant, but we also want them to be comfortable. Sometimes what we see in dogs is that they are compliant, but that means that they are rigid and they're stiff as a board and they're not moving because they're terrified. And we don't want that either. That's not ideal. And so we want to figure out a way to make them really comfortable while they're having this process done. I am getting a little bit of feedback in the background and I can hear some rustling. So if everyone can do me a favor and just check your microphones, make sure they're off, I'd appreciate that. So what are some of our big picture goals? So allowing grooming and examination from a care professional while the handler is present is going to be the basic one for the handler's exam. But we're going to break that down into small pieces. If you know me and you kind of know how I work, I like to break things down into really tangible criteria. And so we're going to talk about how we get to that big picture goal in just a moment. Part of their comfort level and compliance while the veterinary professional is examining their lips and their teeth. So they're going to need to peel back the lips to look in the teeth, check the mouth. They're going to need to look closely into their eyes, which can be a very intimate and sometimes uncomfortable, almost intimidating position if you have to advance your body, get into a dog's personal space to stare into their eyes. That could be very uncomfortable at times. Anything with the mouth or their head, and the ears are included as well. If you've ever had an ear infection, and I was one of those kids that grew up with lots of ear infections, having somebody look in your ears when they're already painful can be very, very miserable. Well, unfortunately, the breeds that we predominantly use, Labradors, Goldens, German Shepherds, they are prone to ear concerns. And so if they have ear sensitivity, then they may be more resistant to have somebody handle their head or look in their ears. And so we want to be very careful on how we teach that and teach them to be very comfortable with that. Often lifting up the paws and checking feet is a big one. And what I did not include on this list, but is going to be a very typical part, is looking under the tail into the genital area. And I know it's not a conversation everybody wants to have. It's a little embarrassing, but it's something that veterinary professionals need to do as part of our pets or our future leader dog's health. So for more information on what the handler exam is including, check out page 27 on your manual. So we have laid out for you lots of information on starting handler's exams and getting your pup comfortable with this process. One of the other areas that you're going to want to look in is your puppy timeline. And I realized that if you got your puppy and it was older than 16 weeks of age, you might not have received a timeline because this is something that we only do for the early first few months for each puppy. After that, we focus more on those in for training skills. But if you go back and you do have the timeline, I encourage you to reread them because each entry from week 1 to week 10, and that's not age 1 or age 10, that is the weeks since you got your puppy. So you normally get a timeline ahead of time, and then you get one for each week that you have your puppy up to 10 weeks. It has important information about handling and handler's exam and starting to prepare your puppy. So this entry that I have here is from week 1, and it's for a 7-week-old puppy. It says the future leader dog should be comfortable with a human handling their ears, mouth, feet, and teeth. And so what is that in the early stages? Typically, we approach our puppies when they're tired, when they're less rambunctious, when they're not in a mouthy or grabby mode, when they're not busy playing, and we can sneak our hands in to palpate their feet, their mouth, their teeth, and their ears. Now, of course, like everything else, this comes with a caveat. If they are starting to mouth back, if you're touching their ears and massaging their feet, and they are retracting their paws or retracting their leg, if they're shaking you away from them, if they're jerking or moving themselves back, then that's not beneficial at that time. That type of handling can actually cause negative repercussions down the road, and it's no longer a benefit. We're not teaching them something that's going to help them. If anything, we're teaching them to be more hesitant when hands are touching them. So that's what we want to watch for. We want them to be comfortable. We want them to be kind of snoozing in any position, whether they're laying on their back or on their side. They could be totally asleep, and this is still an appropriate exercise to work through. As we talked about, future leader dogs should be calm prior to starting exercises. They can be in your lap on the floor, and keep the sessions really short. Start with 1 second touch of various body parts, and as your puppy progresses, add seconds to the touch. The key words are seconds, not minutes. It's very easy to want to get overzealous, especially if your puppy is comfortable. You might do a couple of touches and you go, oh, he's doing pretty good. I'm going to do more. And that's actually when I am going to encourage you to stop touching and go on to a different exercise or just let them sleep, because we don't want to overwhelm them with the handling exercises that we're doing. So I skipped forward, and again, you're going to get a timeline once a week for the first 10 weeks. And I believe Zach Jarek, who's in our office, I believe he sends those out on Fridays. So I wanted to fast forward ahead to week 10 so that you could see another example of some of the handling recommendations that we talk about in the timeline. So your puppy is no longer a baby puppy now. They're 16 weeks, and we're recommending grooming, handler's exams, nail trims. Your puppy should allow you to examine their ears readily, their mouth, their eyes, their skin. Check for any sort of abnormalities on the skin, whether it might be any sort of parasites or dry skin or flaking or redness or irritation. All of that, you really need to be able to get into the puppy's personal space and examine closely. Nail trim should be fairly easy to do at this point, and your puppy should be brushed at least once weekly. The puppy coat is starting to be replaced with an adult coat. And again, refer back to your timeline. If you have any questions about the timeline, you feel like you didn't get the timeline, either check in with your puppy counselor, they're your first line of defense, and they can definitely help you out, or check in with your puppy development coordinator and we can help you with that information as well. So as far as teaching handler's exam, there are some foundation skills that I want to talk about that's going to make our teaching of this particular behavior most successful. Some of it, if you have been participating and following my nail trim masterclass, some of this is going to be a carryover. And essentially, we're going to be doing the same thing. We're handling the dog and examining them very, very closely and intimately. And so that's why you're going to see an overlap in some of these skills. So, some of the things that I can do to lay the foundation, and foundation is important in dog training as it is in building a house. Without a solid foundation, it's hard to build to more advanced levels. And so, we want to create something that is easiest and most successful that's going to last the puppy lifelong. So, for that, I want to encourage teaching impulse control games. And chances are, if you've come to any of our virtual training sessions, we've probably spoke about impulse control because it's literally part of every aspect of our training methodologies and recommendations for the dogs in our colony. It's so important for our dogs to be able to make decisions on their own and not to always be prompted by a person. And so impulse control exercises are going to be coming up in almost everything that we do, and handlers or exams are no different. So some of the key components of impulse control games are ground tether and hand tether, which I'm not going to get into today, but you can look in your puppy manual and check out pages between 67 to 69, and that information should be available to you. One thing that I am going to talk about today is what I call the clamshell hand, or what's in your manual as leave it. So you're going to be able to see this, again, if you participated in the Nail Trim Masterclass, you probably got to see this video already. So this is my dog, Reagan. She's a 9-month-old Rhodesian Ridgeback. I'm not currently puppy raising, so she gets to be the subject matter in a lot of my training. And I'm going to be doing the clamshell game with her. This is essentially how we teach Leave It. And the object of the game is that I'm going to present a single kibble or treat in my hand and the flat portion of my hand. And if she decides to move her body forward and sniff or investigate or attempt to grab the treat out of my hand, I close it up tight like a clamshell so that she's not able to get it. The second that she retreats her head and she moves away and she makes that decision completely on her own. I don't want to prompt her and I don't want to tell her what to do. But once she backs up on her own or makes that decision to move away, guess what? The clamshell of my hand opens up again and she's able to get the treat when I mark yes. And I'm using the exact same marker that you guys do. An enthusiastic yes, like you won the lotto, is exactly what identifies the behavior that I liked, I want to see more of, and I want her to repeat. So let's take a look at that video.
Yes. 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 Yes.
So I'm going to stop it there. So what information did you guys hear me telling her? Other than the word yes, I wasn't giving her any verbal information. I was truly allowing her to make that decision to back away from the treat on her own. So I want you guys to guess. I'll give you a couple of minutes. I'm going to make sure. If you see me looking off to the side, I have my phone so that I can see the chat room at the same time. And so I'm going to make sure that I'm watching the chat room. And I have a question for you guys. Why do you think that it's important to teach impulse control as it relates to the handler's exam? So I'm going to give you a couple of minutes and see what you come up with. Yep, I see a couple. Very good. Nice answers coming in. Lori said, so that they're not biting the equipment or brushes. Very, very important. I'm sure that you guys all have perfect puppies. Jane says, leave the examiner hands alone. Yes. So for you guys with perfect puppies, this does not matter. But for the rest of us that have wiggly puppies, that are dancing around, that are sniffing the stethoscope, that are jumping in their face and trying to grab treats and nibbling hands and so excited, that can be really problematic. Many of the things that we need to do during a veterinary exam, and you guys are all coming up with the same idea, really nice. Many of the things that we need to do during the veterinary exam require some level of stillness at a period of time. So whether we are listening to the heart via stethoscope or the lungs, whether we're looking into the eyes with different equipment, if we're looking into the ears, all of that are really, really important times that we at least need the puppy to be still for a couple of seconds. And so that's why we work on impulse control outside of this scenario, is that it's going to help us prepare for when they are in that scenario. I want them to learn stillness, making a choice to be still is what gets me rewarded. If I'm still for a second, then I'm going to get reinforcement. Good answers, guys. All right, so we're going to move on. So another one of our foundation skills, and you can see that there's a page number in the corner. Page 64 is where you can find this in your manual. This is a game called Hands On, Hands Off. And this is something that we worked really, really heavily on. I'm going to say going backwards 2 or 3 years, this is something that we really pushed and we were really big components of, and we still are. The nice idea behind hands on, hands off, is that the premise was we teach this conditioned emotional response. When somebody's hands are touching the dog gets something really tasty like treats or peanut butter, so on and so forth, maybe some cheese. And when the hands leave your body and they're no longer touching you, guess what? The food stops at the same time. So you work with a partner. There's somebody that's feeding the dog and somebody that's examining the dogs. And you guys work in conjunction with each other and communicate. I'm going to be touching your dog and starting my exam. And as you go to touch them, the food starts in lavish amounts. So the dog's getting fed, but really promptly, kind of like a light switch on and off. As soon as the handler's hands stop examining, the food stops as well. So what does that teach our dog? It's a really, really good idea to be touched and really great idea to be examined. And if you allow this, and if you're comfortable with this, then you're going to get paid lavishly. Well, guess what? It was working wonderfully, and our vets were really impressed with where we had come from. Some of our dogs had been shined or somewhat aloof, and were not very comfortable with handling. And we were able to turn our pups around to be more eager and interested about handling. The unfortunate part about hands-on, hands-off is that our dogs were getting a little bit too overzealous. So our vets were not always able to listen to their lungs and hearts. They weren't always able to complete their exam because they were wiggling and so excited and so enthusiastic about the food that they had a moving target that they were working with. And so we have backed off hands-on, hands-off slightly, and we've come up with some new things for you to teach that are going to be slightly more effective. Hands-on, hands-off for a shy dog and in the early foundation skills is still extremely valuable. So I want you to make sure that you go back. There's a YouTube video on our general puppy raising YouTube page. It's not under the link only section. So you can find the YouTube link there. And then of course there's information in your manual. So make sure that you check out hands-on, hands-off. Another one of my foundation skills is I Spy, and this is another exercise I really love. If you want more information on I Spy, my cohort Laura Fisher did a wonderful virtual training session on I Spy. I think it was actually one of our, I'll call it the OG, one of our original virtual training sessions way back last year when we first started doing these. I think that was one of the early ones that Laura did, and it's still really important and beneficial to this day. So go back and watch her whole YouTube video. I am going to play a little video clip that I did with my dog. So the idea behind this exercise is that it's really taking place with the handler and dog only. One of the reasons why I like this as opposed to hands-on and hands-off is that some of the feedback that I get from our puppy raisers is that they may not have another person that's with them or somebody that can help them out. Maybe they live alone. And so how do I work through the scenario by myself? Well, I Spy is the perfect game for that because it's just you and your dog. While the handler is touching a part of the dog's body, and typically as a group we say, I spy the bump on my puppy's head or their tail or their chest, you don't have to do that by yourself. You can decide on a body part that you want to touch. You rest your hands softly on that spot. You want to mark yes enthusiastically, and our yes tells our dog that a treat is coming. But what is most important and what we really try to achieve is that you are saying yes while your hand remains in that position. And only when you're done saying yes, that you remove your hand, you reach into your treat bag and get your treat. So typically for this reason, we recommend that you use the same hand to touch as you use the same hand to deliver a treat. Now, just for the setup and video so that you can still see, just know that I'm not going to be doing that every time with my dog, but that there is the most important part, which is the space of time between my hand touching her body, marking yes, removing, and then going into my treat bag and delivering the treat. All right. So next up is a video, and again, this is going to be Reagan doing I Spy.
Yes. 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 Yes.
All right. So if you have any questions about I Spy, feel free to let me know. If not, we're going to keep on moving forward because we still have a lot more ground to cover. So we built our foundation. So the foundation games that we played were I Spy. We played the impulse control clamshell game. And then we also used hands on, hands off. Oh, I do see a question. Mary Hadda says, did you say that the treat hand touches the dog? Mary, in an ideal world, yes, the treat hand should touch the dog. And the reason why we do that is to really to make sure that your timing stays nice and slow and calm. Because when our hand is, so this hand is mocking as my dog. If we rest our hand on the dog, we say yes. I want to leave my touching hand on the dog while I'm saying yes. That's key number one, super important. When I'm done saying yes, this hand can move away, get my treat, and come back and deliver it. So if your timing is really good, which hand you use doesn't really matter. But it is really valuable and helpful that if you're trying to master your timing, you want to use the same hand. For the video, I would have to cross over my body and you guys would just see my back to the video, which is why I did separate hands. Hopefully that makes sense. Okay, so we talked about our foundation level training, and now we're moving up to the next level. So if we've practiced those exercises, our dog has gotten really good at them. The next level training is this. We're going to marry I Spy and clamshell game together to make I Spy with impulse control. So I'm going to do this very similarly to what I was doing before. I'm going to offer my hand with a treat in front of the dog's body at their eye level so that they can see it. And I'm going to specifically wait for them to be still, just as I was doing in the clamshell game. When I do that, as long as they're still, I'm going to reach in and touch part of their body with my opposite hand, just as I would do with I Spy. As long as they don't move, then they get marked yes, and then they get the treat delivered. So this is a double whammy. This is why this is the next level training. It's because it's going to be complex for us as a person to remember all of these components, but also complex for the dogs that they're going to have to think about a couple of different things at the same time. One of the benefits, and we can talk about this after you see the video, is that I purposely have my treat hand in front of their body for them to stay focused at. The reason being is part of that impulse control. Remember when we talked about before that our dogs might be dancing around, they're wiggling, they're turning back to see what the veterinarian's hands are doing, where the stethoscope is at, where treats are coming from. And I want them to stay looking forward while they're getting their exam, which is why I keep my treat hand in front of their body at eye level. So watch for all of that in our videos.
Yes. 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 It is Reagan.
All right, lots of good questions coming in. I will go back and try to make sure that I answer each of them. So Mary Hedis, you had a question. So if the dog was to pull their foot away that you were trying to touch, you would move further up the leg to a point that he accepts the touch. Exactly. Or I would figure out some way to make it easy. Now, when we have very wiggly puppies, we may not actually touch their body because that's going to be too stimulating for them. I may move my hand close to their body without actually touching and rewarding them for staying still. That's a good question. Hopefully that answers your question. If not, let me know. This is from the Jordan family, Amy Jordan family. She says, my video is somewhat delayed. Are you touching before you're marking? Yes. That is correct. I am doing that because the mark identifies what behavior that I liked. So I presented the food so that she would watch at that and practice her impulse control. I'm not going to dive my head forward and grab the food. Then I snuck my hand in to touch part of her body. And as long as she didn't move, which is my ideal behavior, I don't want her reacting to the food or to my touch, then I mark yes to identify that I really liked that. And I went ahead and delivered the food to her. So that's the part that I was rewarding. Let me know if I can explain a little bit more. Matthew says that the audio was a little off. It's hard from the video, makes it difficult to tell when you are marking. Yeah, it's one of those tricky things with our videos. We are getting better and braver with our videos, playing them in presentation, but we're still finding that there's some delays and that they're not as smooth as what we're seeing on our end. If I can find a different way to let you guys know exactly when I'm marking, I definitely will. You will have the videos available on YouTube. Hopefully they play a little bit better on the recording. If not, definitely feel free to contact myself, your puppy coordinator, or your puppy counselor, and we can help sort out the details a little bit more. Sorry that they're not as matched as we would like them to be. Myrna says, I thought that the treat hand was supposed to be closed prior to allowing them to take it. Video is choppy, so it's hard to see. It does not have to be closed, Myrna. It can be open as long as they're not diving for it. So we close that clamshell again if they are starting to dive for it, and I allow it to be open so that they make a decision on their own when is appropriate to go for the treat. And of course, the appropriate answer is after I say yes and offer it to you. Laura says, it looked like I marked before I touched. No, that's probably just the choppiness of the video. I was definitely making sure that I was touching first, then marking calm and still behavior. All right. All right, guys, so we'll keep moving forward. So this one more video, and I apologize if it's herky or jerky again. This is more of a fluent examination, so we're moving a little bit faster, but still doing it with impulse control, and hopefully you can see it in this video.
Breathe in, stand, yes. 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 Yes.
So I'm going to pause it for just 1 second. Hopefully you guys can see, and I know the audio is not necessarily matching up with what's going on in the video, but I am trying to preferentially mark when she's looking forward or not interacting with my hands or my body. And the timing is not going to be perfect in early stages. It's, again, something that we work on and perfect over a period of time.
Yes. Yes. Begin.
So here you could see that I stopped. I never marked yes because she was starting to get wiggly. She was turning around and looking and trying to engage with what my hand was doing in the back half of her body. So I decided to just take a little break. She walked away and I'm just going to reset her.
Baby. Sit. Yes.
So that last one, when she was looking forward, that's when I was marking yes. You couldn't see it as well off camera, but I was touching the back half of her body. And that's pretty much where the video ends. So we're going to go ahead and move forward. So I want to talk a little bit about just some pointers and some thoughts when it comes to the handler's exam. So the dogs can be in any position when they are being examined, especially when we're teaching this. We can teach this in any position that your dog feels comfortable within. There are no limitations. So if your dog's better in a stand or in a down or in a sit or laying on their side, which I call dead dog pose, all of which are perfectly appropriate for them to be in. If you have a dog that is really good at doing a chin target or a chin rest, that's appropriate to practice during your handler's exam. So there are no steadfast rules that we put in place for this. We want comfort and we want compliance. And so we can kind of play within those parameters on how we get there to achieve it. The exam can take place also anywhere your dog feels comfortable, or a vet may have a preference. Same with groomers. So most groomers examine dogs and groom them up on a grooming table. A veterinarian may want to lift them onto a table as well, an exam table. They may be sitting in a chair. They may have the dog on the floor. And so what is important is to practice in different scenarios. If you have mastered the handler's exam with you sitting on the floor and your dog laying in a down with you, then maybe you try while you're sitting in a chair and slowly add to your criteria and make it unique and make it slightly more difficult so that they learn different positions. You can also learn what may be more comfortable for them. I have seen some dogs that are more comfortable in a stand than they are in a down, and that's really up to them. It's your choice. Something to keep in mind though, when it comes to, I'll say, looking under the hood. Vets do need to examine under the tail and under the belly, and sometimes in a sit position or in a down position, that may cause a challenge. So you may want to try practicing some of your positions in a stand or even rolling them onto their side as well. Build success on your own. I know that sometimes the comment is right now, well, I'm not able to see my counselor in person, or I don't have another person helping me. That's perfectly okay, because in order to get success with another person interacting with your future leader dog, you really need to build success on your own. So can you do it in different locations and in different positions, completely alone with just you and your dog, getting compliance and non-wiggling? They're not checking you out or nibbling on your fingers. If you can, then that's when you can bring in another person. And I recommend starting with a familiar person, somebody that your dog already knows, because if they're not able to do it with you or a familiar person, then it's going to be that much harder when it comes to somebody that's unfamiliar to them. So this is what our foundation and what our skills look like in order to achieve. So at the base of the pyramid, you see those basic early handling skills, all of those components that we talked about in your timelines, week 1 through 10 of having your puppy. We talked about those foundation skills, which were I Spy, hands-on, hands-off, and my goodness, I'm drawing a blank. Then your next level training. We talked about incorporating I Spy with impulse control, which is what we were missing from the foundation skills, and success with the handler in order to get to success with the unfamiliar person. So I hope that clears your minds when it comes to handler's exam, answers all your questions. We do have some time. Oh, we don't have time. It's 5:50, guys, and I promised I was going to go under time. Next time. So we do have a few minutes for questions. I have a few minutes to stay on if anybody has questions. Thank you so much for participating. Of course, these are my dogs that you get to see. And thank you for attending. We'll see you next time. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, Melissa.
Bye.
Bye.